Hello and welcome to another TLDR Explains video. You might have noticed in the news increasing tensions in Scotland between the SNP's current leader, Nicola Sturgeon, and her predecessor, Alex Salmond. This tension relates to Salmond's exit from the party and the sexual harassment allegations levelled against him. So in this video we're going to try and get to the bottom of what's happened in the annoyingly complicated Salmond inquiry and the battle between Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon. If you like the summaries we give to news stories like this, you ought to check out the Daily Briefing. The Daily Briefing is our daily rundown of some of the biggest news stories, where we catch you up and simply explain what's happening. You can find the video version on the TLDR Daily YouTube channel, it's linked below. You can listen to the podcast by searching in your favourite podcast app, or read the newsletter by signing up below. Thank you so much for your support. So, a forewarning. This story is frustratingly complicated, and because not all of the evidence has come to light yet, sometimes a bit confusing. Nonetheless, it's our job to condense down complicated but important stories, so we're going to give it a go anyway. Some very basic context. Alex Salmond was the leader of the SNP before Nicola Sturgeon took the reins in 2014. Salmond and Sturgeon used to be a bit of a double act, however, since their glory days working together, their relationship has soured significantly. Anyway, this specific story starts in October of 2017. In the wake of the MeToo movement and a whole load of sexual misconduct allegations in Westminster and Holyrood, the SNP decided to revamp the Scottish Government's sexual misconduct policy. 6 weeks later, in mid-December 2017, Nicola Sturgeon signed off on a new sexual misconduct process. Importantly, the process applies retroactively to ex-ministers like Salmond. Anyway, in January 2018, 2 female staff members made formal complaints to the Scottish Government about Alex Salmond's behaviour back when he was First Minister of Scotland in 2013. Now, by the time these allegations are being made, Salmond isn't even an SNP MP anymore, having lost his Gordon constituency seat to Scottish Conservative Colin Clark in the June general election. Regardless, and in accordance with the new procedure, the Scottish Government started an internal investigation into Salmond, which he found out about in March. Salmond then told Sturgeon about these allegations on either March 29th or April 2nd. Problem is, we're not sure which. Skip forward to August 23rd and the investigation is finished. Someone, we don't know who, leaks the story to the Daily Record, who splash it all over their front page on August 24th. Salmond is unsurprisingly a bit annoyed, and on September 1st, after crowdfunding over £100,000 for legal fees, launches a judicial review of the whole process, which he claims was unfair and biased against him. Importantly, Salmond didn't dispute the claims about sexual misconduct. The judicial review was about the fairness of the complaints process itself, not the particular complaints. Regardless, on the 8th of January 2019, Salmond wins the case. The court rules that the process was, quote, tainted by apparent bias, in large part because the investigating officer knew one of the complainants, and as a result, the Scottish Government had to pay Salmond a massive £512,000 in legal fees. Now, it's worth noting here that the government didn't really have a case here, and that their own lawyers told them in December they didn't have a leg to stand on. Basically, the government kept fighting, even though their own lawyers were telling them they had no chance of winning. In reaction to this, 2 further inquiries were launched, and on January 19th, Holyrood sets up a committee to investigate the process. At about the same time, Nicola Sturgeon opens an inquiry into herself and whether she broke ministerial code, a process which is run by QC James Hamilton. So remember, we've got 2 separate inquiries going on here, one into the process and one into Sturgeon. However, none of this was good for Salmond, because literally a few days later, on January 24th, Alex Salmond is arrested by the police and charged with 13 counts of sexual assault with 9 women. On March 23rd, Salmond is acquitted on all counts, but it's not a dignified affair. During the trial, Salmond, who is married, admits that he did have sexual contact with 2 of the women, both of whom were his junior and a lot younger. He also says that he should have been more careful with people's personal space, and a better man on occasions. It also turns out that civil servants were so worried about him that they tried to make sure that female civil servants didn't work with him alone. Ultimately in the case, his defence is basically that he's a creep, but not a criminal. So, with that court proceeding settled, let's return to the two inquiries. In February 2021, Salmond was supposed to give evidence to the committee conducting the inquiry, but his written submission is redacted by the Scottish Parliament, apparently because the evidence could lead to the identification of one of the claimants. Salmond says that he needs to refer to his written submission in his oral testimony, and as such cancels his appearance. This all seems a bit suspicious, so The Spectator magazine goes to the High Court to see whether there's any legal impediment to his evidence being published. The High Court says that actually it's fine, so The Spectator publishes the evidence nearly in full on their website. So, following that, everyone expects the committee to publish it in full, but the Crown Office, which is basically the Scottish Government's lawyers, step in and redact some elements. But now, because we have the full version on the Spectator's website, we can tell which bits were redacted. And quite a lot of the redaction seems to be about whether Sturgeon talked to Salmond about the investigation on March 29th, 2018, something which she denies. Anyway, last Friday, Salmond finally appeared in front of the committee and made quite a number of accusations. The first is that Sturgeon misled the Scottish Parliament about the March 29th meeting. Sturgeon originally claimed that there was no meeting on March 29th, but then changed her story and claimed that although there was a meeting, it wasn't about the investigation. She also says the same thing about a meeting on April 2nd. This is important because any meetings to do with government business, like the government's internal investigation into Salmond, would need to be recorded, and Sturgeon didn't keep any records of this meeting. Peter Morrell, Nicola Sturgeon's husband and chief executive of the SNP, also said that the April 2nd meeting wasn't about the investigation. Regardless, Salmond claims that they're both lying. So Nicola Sturgeon broke ministerial code by failing to record the meetings and by misleading Parliament about the content of said meetings. Salmond also accuses the Crown Office, and specifically the Lord Advocate, James Wolfe, of being politically motivated in their redaction of his evidence. Now, there are reasons to think this is unlikely. While Wolfe was appointed by the SNP in 2016, it's worth noting that Lord Advocate isn't a political position, as the Attorney General in the UK, because the Lord Advocate is both legal advisor to the government and also head of the prosecution service, so they have to be a well-respected lawyer and relatively apolitical. It seems unlikely then that Wolfe would put his own legal career on the line in order to take down Alex Salmond. Also, Holyrood MPs aren't as protected by parliamentary privilege as Westminster MPs, and could actually commit contempt of court if they somehow accidentally identified one of the complainants. So it's possible the Crown Office were genuinely just trying to protect them. Nonetheless, it certainly is a bit fishy that all of the bits that were redacted are also the parts which would have made life uncomfortable for Sturgeon. Salmond also claims that the government only pursued the judicial review to make him look bad. Somewhat suspiciously, the Scottish Government have refused to publish the legal advice they received about the judicial review, despite the fact that the Scottish Parliament has voted for them to do so twice. Basically, Salmond thinks that the government knew they were going to lose, but that they could fight it until Salmond got arrested, and then quietly drop it, and no one would notice because Salmond would be on trial. Salmond's final two accusations are that Sturgeon's chief of staff leaked the name of one of the complainants to Salmond's team, which in itself would be illegal, and that the leak to the Daily Record was also politically motivated, and that he thinks he knows who did it. So those are Salmond's accusations, and on Wednesday, Sturgeon is expected to appear before the committee, so we'll have to wait and see what happens next, and hear her side of the saga. Regardless, let us know what you think of the situation in the comments below, and let us know what you expect to happen next. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a video like this one. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this possible, and if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that is in the description.